Hi guys, Emma here, and today I want to talk some more about Mark Frost's book, The Final Dossier. Apologies for not recording this a couple of weeks back. I have been ill with the flu and my throat is still a bit sore actually. But I want to specifically talk today about Laura Palmer because I'm interested in how the book expands on what we were left with in season 3. So basically at the end of season 3, I think a lot of people were theorizing about what had happened to Laura. Was that really Laura at the end, that Carrie Page character? Was it a different timeline? Was it a different world? Nobody really knows. We saw in the series that Cooper did in fact change the timeline by saving Laura in the past because we saw like Pete go fishing and the body wasn't there on the shoreline. And so we know that this happened. We know that Cooper did save Laura, but what happened after that we don't really know. We see Cooper, or a version of Cooper, as like a Richard, and we also see a version of Laura as Carrie. But what is this place? Where is it? Is it a real place? Is it a fictional place? Is it inside the lodge? Is it another timeline? Is it Judy's force field? All these questions are sort of unanswerable, but we do get a little bit more information about Laura in the final dossier. However, I do think that Frost has deliberately left the Laura question wide open in case they ever want to return to Twin Peaks, because I think that Laura and Cooper are the heart of the story. One thing that surprised me about this is Tammy's unraveling of the Laura story. So what happens is, I feel like this might be a bit muddled, but in season 3, when we see the scene with Cooper in the sheriff's station and it all goes black, I know that after that a lot of people were saying like, well, does that mean that the timeline has ended and Cooper has destroyed that particular timeline, and this means that this is Cooper's dream and this is him maybe waking up or you know, going into a different dream or something like that. And what we find out from the final dossier is that no, that wasn't what happened. Actually, this timeline that we see in season 3 continues because Tammy relates what happens next, and she says like, we were in the sheriff's station and the lights went out and things just went on, you know. She's like addressing this to Gordon Cole. She says, you went off with Cooper and met the Horn brothers. Is sort of strange because Jerry wasn't around to be met at that particular time, so that could indicate a timeline change that has happened. But another timeline change that has happened is that while Tammy is writing her report, she suddenly becomes aware of the fact that Laura Palmer is in fact missing, whereas she thought that Laura Palmer was dead. I'm sure that many of you will have heard of the Mandela effect, where people think that they know something, but it turns out that what they think they know isn't actually true. So it's called after the idea that many people think that Nelson Mandela died when he was in prison. So many people remember that happening that many people think that it is something strange to do with the timeline being altered by maybe time travelers or something like that. But I don't know if it's just, you know, memories going bad. But in Tammy's case, it appears that the timeline has been changed and by Cooper. And so instead of a different timeline being created by Cooper's action, the timeline seems to have remained the same, at least for these characters that we are seeing in season 3. And that timeline continues. So Tammy describes this Mandela effect, and she says, I'm glad I've written all this down rapidly because my own thoughts about every one of these events are growing fuzzier and more indistinct the longer I stay here. Creeping into my mind like a mist, I can feel a kind of mental lassitude physically advancing on me. Something's wrong, whether it's with me or this place, I don't know, and I don't really care anymore. I need to pull the emergency brake right now and get the hell out of here. So I don't know if like the effect starts like at the place where the timeline has been changed. So maybe if you're in Twin Peaks, the people of Twin Peaks sort of notice the changes more quickly than people outside of Twin Peaks. But it's really interesting that the things that we learn in the final dossier, they're like small changes, but a lot of things remain the same. The world as we know it, Twin Peaks, the world of Twin Peaks, as we've viewed it as fans, remains essentially the same, except there are a few odd details that have changed. The most notable being that Laura Palmer is no longer dead. She is just missing. And there is some question, I think, about whether a lot of the bad stuff that we read about in the final dossier, which have happened to characters, would have happened whether Cooper had stopped Laura being killed. And I don't know. I mean, there is a lot of evidence that Frost seems to be trying to make Cooper into this fallen hero, as if to say, you know, he didn't succeed, he was a troubled man, he wasn't this knight in white armor that saved everyone. I think that's Tammy's observation, actually, that she thinks Cooper has this white knight syndrome in which he likes to save women and save these damsels in distress. We get some expansion on the Caroline and Wyndham Earle situation, and in that I feel like Cooper is almost exonerated from blame, because Mark Frost talks about how Wyndham sort of pushed the two together in a way that he wanted them to take that step to have an affair. And although Cooper and Caroline obviously had a choice there, if you think about Cooper, who was a man who had betrayed his best friend, then that is obviously a stain on Cooper's character. But the way it's described in this book, I think that it makes Cooper sound more of a hero and more of a person who was wanting to really stop Caroline from being hurt. And yes, that is the White Knight syndrome coming into play, but at the same time, he was almost pushed into that role by Wyndham. I don't like to think of Cooper as a failed hero. I don't like the fact that his hero status has been dismantled by these stories about him trying to save Laura and trying to save Annie. Everything that has happened to these poor people seems like it's happened because Cooper was in their lives, but I don't necessarily think that that's true. So another thing I want to discuss is Sarah Palmer, and in the final dossier it was revealed that Sarah Palmer was actually the Frogmoth girl, which really kind of threw me for a loop because I did not think that that was Sarah, and I couldn't, you know, it changes everything, the fact that Sarah was infected by this Frogmoth creature and what that meant. Changes a lot about this Palmer storyline and the whole storyline of Twin Peaks, in fact. It's just very difficult to wrap my head around. I think, to be honest, that there are so many incarnations, you know, these different beings we have in Twin Peaks now, and we had even more added to the mix in season 3, that it is kind of difficult to get your head around. It's difficult for me anyway, to know who is who and what is what and where they are from and what they want and who their allies are and what their motives are. It's just, I think that's really difficult to sort into some kind of order. I don't exactly know what's going on with Sarah Palmer and whether the Frogmoth thing evolved inside of her, and that's why she ultimately becomes this woman who kills people, like we saw her kill the guy at the bar in season 3, or whether she was always under the control of this creature and we just didn't see it. Leland is described as committing suicide in this version. I mean, there are some theories I know that say Cooper is on this loop and he has tried to save Laura, and if he doesn't succeed, I should say, he goes back to the beginning and he tries again. So basically this timeline that we see in season 3 and in this book could be sort of in flux, and it could be that it could change at any time. Anything could change if Cooper is continually on this loop, and that we didn't see Cooper succeeding at the end of season 3. We saw him fail. He might have then gone back to the beginning and gone back to see Jeffries and been sent back in time to a different day. Who knows? It's just wide open, basically. I mean, I know I have said several times that I do think this is the end of Twin Peaks and we won't get any more content, but at the same time I do think the Laura and Cooper storyline is left wide open and there is room for more story there, definitely. But as far as all the other characters go, I feel like we have been given their stories. At least we've been given more than we had in season 3. We've been given a lot more with this book. I seem to have rounded the story off nicely, I think, and I don't feel as unsettled as I did at the end of season 3 after having read this book, although I do think, you know, I am in my head thinking, you know, what happened? What happened to Laura? What happened to Cooper? And it's still like out there thinking, well, I wish I knew the conclusion of their story. So I don't really think there's much else to say about the book. If you have any thoughts about anything regarding the book, you can leave them in the comments below. Basically, I think that now that the timeline has been changed and the possibility exists that the timeline could be changed at any time, then anything could happen to anybody, which is a bit of a strange thing to consider, because it means that the story, you know, there's so much potential in the storyline. You could go any direction that your mind can take you, basically. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I want to apologise if I didn't get around to like replying to messages in the past couple of weeks. I've been a bit wiped out with this cold I've had. It's been really bad. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do on this channel from now on. I am watching a couple of shows on Netflix. I might do a couple of quick reviews of those. Next week I'm going to be watching David Lynch's Lost Highway, just for fun and just to give my opinions on that. I hope you can join me for that. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you very much for watching today. You can follow me on Twitter at @thevloglady, and I'm also on Facebook as well. That's it. Okay, bye.